For the hour, Congressman Mark Pocan is with us, U.S. Congressman representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin. His website, pocan.house.gov. And Congressman, welcome back to our program.
Oh, thanks. Glad to be here, Tom.
Thanks so much for being with us, and thanks so much for taking calls from our listeners. It's something that our listeners certainly appreciate. They've been doing for over a decade with Bernie, and great to have you able to do the same thing. Before we get to the calls from listeners, though, for you, you want to give us just a little bit of who is Mark Pocan for people who might just be tuning in. I know we've been getting a lot of new listeners and viewers over the last few months, particularly with the elections and whatnot. And then B, what's on your mind these days? What are you seeing happening in the country that you'd like to riff on a little bit?
Oh, absolutely, Tom. No, thanks so much, and I'm really glad to do this. This is a great way to have a conversation with people to make sure that we're proposing the right things in Washington, especially those of us who are progressive. We want to make sure we're listening to the people who are out there. This is my 2nd term in Congress. I represent South Central Wisconsin. Madison, Wisconsin is about a third of my district, but I also have very rural counties in my congressional districts. I've got a pretty diverse congressional district. I spent 14 years in the Wisconsin state legislature prior to being in Congress. In fact, the last term I served was during what we refer to as the uprising, when Scott Walker did those terrible collective bargaining changes and started a lot of the destruction that he did, unfortunately, to our state. And currently in Congress, I serve as the first vice chair of the Progressive Caucus. I do a lot of work there. I love working with, we are the largest values-based caucus in Congress, 71 members. And I also serve on the Education and Workforce Committee. I do a lot of labor and education legislation and work within our caucus. I'm a member of a trade union, the Painters and Allied Trades. And I also serve on the Budget Committee. So we're very involved in that process that'll be coming up in a couple weeks.
Wow, you were a painter once?
Well, I actually through a sign shop. It's a part of Painters and Allied Trades, the union. So had a small 4-person union printing business, and been doing that since I was 23. So,
wow. So you're an entrepreneur also.
I'm sorry?
You're an entrepreneur as well.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah,
that is great. So and well, actually, let's just pick up some of our phone calls here, and unless you want to. Oh, actually, I'd said, what do you think about what on the political horizon right now has got you most scratching your head, or most upset, or most happy?
Well, in Washington, I think the big thing we've been preparing for in the Progressive Caucus is the budget. Paul Ryan has moved the process up a month. So in 2 weeks, we'll be marking up the Republicans' version of the budget, which, as you can imagine, is filled with all kinds of things that aren't very acceptable to the public, but very good for a very few and a lot of special interests in the country. But we'll have our own Progressive Caucus People's Budget. It's prosperity, not austerity, investing in America, looking at things like have happened in Flint, Michigan, trying to talk about investing in things like education and infrastructure, and trying to figure out how we can help raise the wages of the people in the country. So I'm putting a lot of time. We're coordinating that this year for the caucus, and it's something that's one of our signature kind of things that we do, and really puts out a statement of values that one of the interesting things is a lot of the ideas we put out there, we'll find a session or two later, the Democratic Party as a whole will be taking in. So we often are the idea starter for, I think, things that often will hopefully become legislation when we have a chance to take back the majorities here.
I understand that that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell said to President Obama, don't bother sending your budget over to Capitol Hill or your budget director. We're not going to talk to them.
For the first time ever, I think the Budget Committee is refusing to have the head of the OMB come and present the president's budget to our Budget Committee. And even though we've asked and we've argued about it, they refuse to, which is just, again, it's just the continued disrespect we've seen for the last 8 years towards President Barack Obama. But secondarily, I think they don't want to talk about the issues that we put out there because they know the people agree with us on the issues, and they'd rather not discuss that. They'd rather just put out their version of the budget and see if they can keep the Tea Party from revolting.
There you go. Okay, let's pick up some phone calls here. Bill in Godfrey, Illinois. You are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yeah, hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my phone call. It's very democratic of you. My name's Bill Toole, and I'd just like to thank the congressman for supporting House Resolution 48, which is the We the People Amendment. I know there's a lot of interest. You had a call yesterday from a young lady named Beverly was interested in the subject of that proposed bill, and I'd like to encourage her to visit the website. In fact, all your listeners maybe double down at this point on the We the People Amendment and visit the Move to Amend website and sign up for the actions and the information.
Great.
And thank you again, Mark, for supporting that, and hope we can get some more supporters. We've even got a Republican supporter for the bill.
That's great. Bill, thank you for that. Congressman Pocan, your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, thank you for your comments. And, I tell you, I can't think of an issue that probably hits every other subject I deal with in Congress that affects it more than campaign finance reform. And whether it be the disastrous decision of Citizens United and the effect that big money has had on politics here, to just, the day-to-day operations. There are plenty of special interest lobbyists in Washington. And when they have all that money to put into campaigns, its effort is to drown out the people who live in our districts, our constituents that we're elected to represent. But with the current system being often more of an auction than an election, depending how much money you raise, it really distorts the process from having, a majority of my colleagues are millionaires. Not saying if you're a millionaire you can't be sympathetic to the issues that affect, working families across the country, but it does distort who gets elected and how you get elected. And if we're going to retain our democracy, we've got to change how we finance campaigns. I was always the author of 100% public financing when I was in the Wisconsin legislature. I think it's the single best way for us to try to be able to restore our democracy so that everyone has an equal voice and money doesn't somehow have a voice. And that disastrous Supreme Court decision is something that has to be overturned.
Yeah.
So thank you, Bill. I really appreciate your comments.
Excellent. Chris in Darlington, South Carolina. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hey, Congressman and Professor. Great show as always. But
thank you.
First, real quick, the Act Blue website, for those people who can't afford to give a large lump sum to Bernie, you can set up a recurring every week or every month to come out of your bank account, and every little bit helps.
So, did you have a question for Congressman Pocan, Chris?
And my question for Congressman Pocan is, it looks to me like the Republican Party, if it wasn't for the Tea Party, they'd be down to 20% of Congress anyway, and they're so captivated by the Tea Party that they're circling the drain. They're fragmenting, and what I see in the future is the right wing of the Democrats are going to end up being the new Republicans, and the current Republicans are going to be something on the order of the John Birch Society.
So you're asking the congressman his thoughts on the demise of the Republican Party, right?
Yeah.
Chris, thanks for the call. Congressman?
Yeah, thanks. Chris, thanks for your question. And, it is interesting when you look at where the Republican Party has gone in really a relatively short amount of time. They purged their moderates out, and the birth of the Tea Party has been just an amazing phenomena for us to try to govern through. It's 40 or 50 hardcore Tea Party people that basically have stopped up the process in Congress, but we don't want to think it's just 40 or 50 hardcore people, because I remember in previous years when we've had the Tea Party version of the budget as opposed to the Progressive Caucus version of the budget get a vote, I quit counting at 127 votes they had one year. That's, getting to be a majority of their caucus voting for a budget that raises the retirement age to 70 and does all kinds of other things that we would consider crazy. So no question, the Tea Party is the dominant force within the Republican Party, and at some point that extreme element could, possibly pull off and form their own. But while they're around, we have some real problems in getting things done here.
Yeah, it's welcome to the Whigs. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Congressman Mark Pocan of the 2nd District of Wisconsin is on the line with us. POCAN.house.gov is the website. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Congressman, you're still with us, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Michael, watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV in Imperial Beach, California. You are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hey, Mr. Hartman and Representative Pocan. Tom, I loved your playing of Senator Bernie Sanders. Representative Pocan. Now, then Representative Bernie Sanders said we spend 11 times more on military than social need.
This was, hang on just a second, Michael, because Congressman may not know. We played a 4.5-minute clip of Bernie in 1994 giving a speech in which he was saying that the crime bill, yeah, we got to do something about crime, but don't we have to do something about the causes of crime, which is poverty? And he went off on this whole thing about how this crime bill was going to create a generation of devastation. Back to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay, but then Representative Bernie Sanders said about the 1994 crime bill, which you just said, 41394, that there is a group of people who are sociopathic. I call them Wall Street. He said it is either education or electrocution. What are your thoughts, Representative Pocan, on the industrial prison complex of hate and vengeance? Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Michael. I'll tell you, when I was in the Wisconsin legislature, this is a little interesting factoid, I guess. I was the ranking Democrat on the Corrections Committee when then State Representative Scott Walker was the chairman of that committee.
Oh, my.
Yes. So, Scott Walker was a huge advocate.
Do you still wake up with nightmares?
Well, it's interesting. Back then, he was a huge advocate for private prisons, and we never went there because we were fortunate that even some of our Republicans knew that was a bad idea to do back in that day. But there is no question that when you incarcerate more people than any other westernized country, any major country in the world, we've got a real distorted system. And when you think just the multiple aspects, what that does to someone's life when someone winds up within the correctional system, what we spend on the system. I think in most states, like in Wisconsin, it's pretty close to about $30,000 a year. Imagine if we had $30,000 a year to send that person to college or to use that for so many other things that would have been worthwhile. And you don't really have the rehabilitative programs within a correction system. You really essentially, that covers warehousing of people. And then when you look at what brings you into the system, many of the drug offenses, especially around marijuana-related offenses and three-striker outlaws and everything when there is that let's get tough on crime period, we never ever got smart on crime. And I think what I'm looking forward to right now is there an opportunity? Because there is an element within the right wing. In fact, Grover Norquist, of all people, I read a column he wrote, I think this is either last year or 2 years ago, on HuffPost, advocating for reducing prison populations. And Tom, I spent 20 minutes on the phone having a one-on-one call with Grover Norquist, and it was pretty fascinating. And while we may come at it for different ways, Grover is really concerned about the cost of crime. I'm concerned about the social aspects of incarceration when we don't need to. There is a movement on the left and the right that I think we might be at a poignant point in time that we could actually have some legislation moves forward that starts to reel that back. And a lot of states have done that, but I think if we can help at the federal level, it will be great for a lot of people who really don't belong in the correction system, and it really destroys people's lives. Yeah,
and if we can do it without getting the mens rea change that the Koch brothers want in there, that'll make it a lot harder to prosecute white-collar corporate executives. That seems to be the thing that's really driving criminal justice reform over on the right. But anyhow, we'll be back. Congressman Mark Pocan with us.
On April 15th,
Okay, Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us, taking your calls. And Don in Kansas City, Kansas. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, did you say Don?
I did. And it sounds like you're Don.
Yes, I am, as a matter of fact.
You're on the air.
But I got two quick questions. One is for you to mull over and think about, and the other one is for him. The question to mull over is, did Obama ever beat Hillary by 20% anywhere in 2008? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you do.
I don't either. But, I don't know. I don't think so.
But they're talking about not being records and all that. But
well, in New Hampshire, I know that this was the biggest blowout on the Democratic side since John Kennedy ran for president. But Kennedy came from the neighboring state of Massachusetts, so that. But anyhow, what's your question for Congressman?
Hillary won last time,
right? But, Don, you and I can have this conversation later. What was your question for Congressman Pocan?
My question for him is: now that they have made pensions assets, your 15% thing, 15% of people have assets. That's fine. I mean, have pensions, but now they're assets. What is Congress planning on doing about that, and what would you do about that? And that's the question.
Sure. Well, thanks, Don. I mean, I think if I could take it slightly broader, I'd appreciate. I think one of the issues we just have to talk about are pensions, period, because for so many years people had much of that provided by often a good family supporting wage from a union job, and they had their pensions there. And with all the attacks on unions, we've lost that. And when we move to some of these 401ks and other plans, IRAs, et cetera, that are out there, we've kind of lost the connection to the pension that we had, and fewer people have really that really supportive pension that we need to, I think, have a new conversation about. And there are some proposals right now in Congress that I think are intriguing. One of them that I know Representative Joe Crowley from New York has, which is to actually, and I'm hoping I'm saying the right amount, but I think it's adding 50 cents an hour on what would be a pay raise to going specifically to putting money aside for additional savings for when someone retires. So we've got Social Security, but no one would argue that Social Security is really enough to sustain people. Right. But half the people in this country have Social Security and maybe their home. A third of the people just have Social Security when they get to retirement, and it's becoming to the point of a bit of a crisis that we have to make sure people are taken care of. Right. And while I think there are some really good provisions to strengthen Social Security, including one that Representative John Larson has to get us to a different way of doing the increases to do instead of the chain CPI that would have cut it, this is a consumer price index /E for senior citizens that focuses on things they spend more money on, including things like medicine, et cetera, but also provides a real increase in benefits and pay. And I think that part of the conversation we need to have this presidential campaign and for all the congressional races is how are we going to strengthen Social Security and Medicare. Right. I don't even want to go where the Republicans are and still trying to cut that.
Right.
And how do we get that done? And then how do we have a bigger debate about the lack of pensions that are out there that took so many people into a more comfortable retirement that is just lacking now.
Well, and I think what Don was pointing out is that back before the Reagan Revolution, corporations, the IRS rules were that a corporation had to book pension obligations as liabilities on their books. So if a corporation had $1 billion pension fund, that was actually $1 billion liability. That made that corporation worth $1 billion less if you were to just buy it and break it up, because you'd have to pay off the pension fund. Mm-hmm. They changed the rules during the Reagan years and said that corporations can book pensions as assets rather than liabilities. So all of a sudden, it became possible and profitable to buy a corporation. So now you've got a corporation. I mean, literally the next day after that rule change, you had corporations that used to have $1 billion liability. Now they have $1 billion asset. Their stock price is the same. You buy that company, you break it up, and you sell off the asset, the pension fund, and end up ultimately bankrupting the company. And that was Carl Icahn's business model with TWA and Eastern, and that's what happened to all these companies, and why all those pension holders got screwed, or at least that's my understanding of it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's that, and we saw I think of the classic example during 2 years ago in the omnibus when there were some changes that happened to pension law. There's the example of the Teamster pensions, which was, again, one of those that was at risk, and then UPS came in and did a negotiated settlement, and when that law came through, a lot of people lost a lot of value in their pensions.
Right.
I just think that, while that certainly is one component of what we can look at, I think we've got a much bigger problem on the horizon, that with the lack of union jobs, the fact that unions have been in a bit of a decline because of a very serious attack by Republicans for political purposes going after them, and not having a real alternative for the mass, the masses really on this, we're going to have more people relying on Social Security, and we need to find a new way to invigorate pensions. And I know one idea that's been brought up in my state is we have a great pension system that Scott Walker tried to change, and he just got blasted from every angle on it. But why can't people maybe buy into some of our state pension systems? They're strong, they're valuable.
It's like a public option, a pension public option.
Exactly. And I think those are some of the future options I'd like to see us talk about.
Fascinating stuff. Congressman Mark Pocan, member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, a great progressive member of the House of Representatives. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. His website, pocan.house.gov. That's Pocan. And we'll be back with Congressman Pocan taking your questions in about 5.5, 6 minutes after the news at the bottom of the hour. Stick around. Kayvon, am I saying that right? In Auburn, Washington? Is it pronounced Kayvon? I have it spelled Keivon. Is that right? Do I have
Kayvon?
that?
Yes.
Yeah, you're on the air.
Do you think that we should reenact the Sherman Act? I'll go now.
Thank you, Kayvon. Congressman, if you missed his question, it was, should we reenact the Sherman Act? Of course, the Sherman Act is still law. I guess really the question is, Reagan dialed back federal enforcement of the Sherman Act in '82, leading to this explosion of mergers and acquisitions that lasts till this day. Should the next president start enforcing it more strictly and go all Teddy Roosevelt?
I think that's something that, should we get a Democratic president, something would be worth looking at. If I can just take it slightly different than that, is what I would like us to really do is really drill down on these inversions of corporations right now that we're having, because a company just in my state just did this, and for a while we only had about 2 companies in the state of Wisconsin. It was a lot of other multinational corporations that were doing this. Inversion essentially is where a company, and I know you've talked about this before, Tom, but where a company buys a foreign company and decides now that's the headquarters, even if it's smaller than the entity that was in the U.S., and they do that to not pay taxes here. And, there already are plenty of loopholes for corporations to not pay taxes, but for them to actually take almost all dollars that they make and then put it to some foreign subsidiary in Ireland or another country, but often in Ireland is the country they go to, completely skirts tax law in every way. And it is the narrowest of loopholes, but they're figuring out how to thread that loophole. I think that's an issue that even, I forgot, I think it was Fortune magazine, one of those even called them, those corporations, treasonous in their wording on a cover story they had once. I mean, this is something that I think we need to address, because companies will continue to use this loophole to already pay even less in tax. So as Republicans tell us how high our corporate tax rate is, even though the effective tax rate is considerably different, we need to go after companies that their pure intention is to cheat the American people on paying their fair share of taxes by doing this ability to buy a company overseas. I've got several pieces of legislation. People like Representative Sandy Levin from Michigan has legislation around this. We need to get a real grasp on this before it costs us a serious amount of revenue that will have major ramifications.
Right. Okay. Richard, in Midway, Tennessee, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Congressman, I have one quick question for you. I'd like to know why it is I never hear anyone in Congress talking about lifting the cap on Social Security taxes.
I'll tell you, people do talk about it here. Quite a few folks. I think it's something we've talked about extensively, members of the Progressive Caucus. The problem is if the reporters decide not to report it, especially in the mainstream media, it's as if it didn't happen. But, that is something that I think a number of people have said, whether you completely lift the cap or you lift it to I think the proposal I've seen by a number of folks is to about 400,000 from the current roughly 116, give or take a little bit, thousand, where people no longer pay that Social Security tax. You could, I know by lifting it completely, you can extend the life of Social Security 75 years into the future.
Which is functionally forever. Yeah, I mean, Bernie has proposed basically leaving a donut hole so that the cap continues to go up as is provided by law, but above $250,000 in annual income, that there's no cap above that. So the upper middle class doesn't get immediately hit, the $118,000 to $250,000 earners, but anybody making over $250,000 on their income after $250,000, they start paying Social Security taxes on it too. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that's a very solid proposal. A number of anything that lifts the cap, but we ultimately have to realize, my mother's one of those folks. I grew up in a lower middle class family. My mom is 86. She just moved into senior housing last year. She worked until she was 70 at a Taco Bell, and she gets $1,140 a month with no increase this year. That was what she got last year. Has very little left as far as any kind of assets at 86. And on the floor of Congress, and I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to do this, Tom, but I guess, if you take out a sheet of paper and write on it, that's interactive. You're not allowed to do that, but I didn't get stopped when I did it. And I, on the floor of Congress, listed, every bill my mother had. And at the time, she still was in her home, and her home was paid for. And we went through all of that, and it added up to more than she got in Social Security. You're running at a deficit at that point. Now, with her renting an apartment in senior housing, she would be at least $800 or $900 in the hole every month. Wow. And, that's the problem. People who've worked all their life and paid into that system can't then have to retire into that sort of a situation. And we need to do everything we can to strengthen that program. And luckily, a number of national groups are out advocating for that. A number of the candidates are advocating for that. We need to make sure that any congressional candidate I talk to, I try to make sure they're talking about this issue because it's one of the best ways to connect with people in their districts.
Okay. Connie, in Dearborn, Michigan, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. And I also just want to say thank you for addressing the inversion issue. The producer made me choose, and that was my second question. So I appreciate you addressing that. My first question is, I want to talk about Democratic Party unity, and I want to know what does the congressman think is the likelihood if we get Bernie Sanders as the Democratic nominee, which I'm hoping is going to happen, that we're going to have the phenomenon we had in the 80s with the Reagan Democrats. What does he think the probability or chances are that we're going to have a phenomenon called Kasich Democrats or Bush Democrats that are going to go that way purely for economic reasons? Thank you.
Sure. Well, first of all, Connie, I think trying to compare Kasich or Bush to even what Reagan said then is still pretty different right now. I mean, the only reason we even have any people saying Kasich at least would be all right, or as people kind of describe him in the general media, is because he's the least nuts of the remainders of the candidates that you have out there. That's the only reason. And I think when we get to the point that we have a Democratic nominee, I am quite sure there'll be unity. And I'll tell you, the Mike 92.1 back in Madison, where people are listening to it in South Central Wisconsin, plays a comment you've said, Tom, all the time about no matter what, we have to get behind that Democratic nominee because of things like the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
We have to have those nominations. And I know that we will be able to send that message to people that we have to rally and get behind that person. But I don't think you're going to have a slippage, because first of all, I don't think Kasich or Bush are very likely to be the nominee. I think either you're still going to be looking at people like Don Trump and the fact that Rubio was supposed to be the establishment alternative and he fell apart, and now the flavor of the week is Kasich. In the end, if we wind up with a brokered convention, you might even have and Tom and I have talked about this, Paul Ryan as a nominee, or a Mitt Romney. No matter what, we are going to offer a very, very different vision than their vision of cutting, privatizing Social Security, hurting Medicare and the program that people count on, that paid into all their life. There's a true difference in the two views that are out there, and I think we'll have the unity that we need.
Yeah. We have just a minute until the next break, Congressman, and which is not really enough time to bring a caller into this. Although one of the callers is asking the question, what do you think the possibilities are of Democrats recapturing Congress in this election this year, so that whether the next president is Hillary or Bernie, that assuming that that the Democrats win the election, what do you think the chances are that we can actually get a progressive legislative agenda passed?
I have seen some polling that if we have Donald Trump or Ted Cruz as the nominee, we are in a position to have a wave to pick up the 30 seats we need in the House. The Senate already people know is in play, and there's a good chance that we can pick that up with people like Russ Feingold in Wisconsin and others. But there is a real chance if those people are out there, because their views have been so extreme in this primary, how they try to reel them back. I mean, Ted Cruz will never reel them back. I think Donald Trump is more of an opportunist, but they still have to live by those words, and that polling is really good right now.
That's fascinating. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this. Pocan, Pocan.house.gov is his website. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
You can check out Congressman Pocan at Pocan.house.gov, or you can plug Mark Pocan, MarkPocan, into Facebook, I'm sure. We'll be back. And welcome back. Congressman, before I screw anything up here, just to verify, you do have a Facebook page, right?
Yes, we do. I didn't want to interrupt while you're saying it, but absolutely.
Okay, cool. David, watching Free Speech TV in Greenfield, California on the DirecTV satellite. Hey, David, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hey, love the show. Listen all the time. First-time caller. My question is, these super delegates that they have in New Hampshire, are altering the will of the people of New Hampshire in regards to the vote. The delegates last night on the Rachel Maddow show were 15 and 15 because 6 of the super delegates voted for Hillary. I'm wondering, how can we get rid of this throwback to an older time and just go with the primary?
Well, this is one thing, David, where I think, the DNC has set the rules for their primary system. That's how it's set up for both the Republicans and Democrats. So they have very different rules. In Iowa, for example, you saw how they counted people and how they did the delegates. To now, the next 2 primaries, I believe, are on different days, the Democratic and the Republican primaries in Nevada and South Carolina. So the states have a lot of prerogative in this, and the DNC does. So, that's the system we've had for, I'm not sure, Tom, you probably know this maybe better than I do, but we've had the superdelegate system in there for a long time. It's not like something new that was put in this time. So I think the candidates knew about that. I think the bottom line, the most important thing is that you want to have as much participation as possible in these, because you're going to have stronger results. And I think, if you don't mind me just adding one little pitch, Tom, but one of the things that Representative Keith Ellison, who's the chair of the Progressive Caucus, and I did this week is we wrote a open letter to PBS asking them tonight to talk about voting rights in the questions to the candidates. Reverend Barber from Moral Mondays was at our Progressive Caucus retreat this past weekend. He challenged members to do more to raise the level of the issue. Right at that moment, Keith and I went up to Reverend Barber and we said we were going to do this because we need to have a better debate than the 3 minutes and 20 seconds that's happened so far on voting rights in Democratic debates, because that is such an important issue. And that is all about the turnout and the people who come out to these primaries, both for the primaries and for the general in November. So we're hoping that there will be a robust conversation about voting rights, and we need to have that.
Yeah, we had on our TV show last week, as I recall, we had a fellow on who has apparently this is the first time the numbers have actually been carefully run. One of the universities, I'm sorry, I can't just pull this off the top of my head, but one of the universities looked at, or did this guy at the university did the math on what are the impact of voter suppression laws. And what he found was, in some states, the impact on the Republicans was generally negligible, but the impact on Democratic votes was as much as -8%.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is such a strategic effort by Republicans, and we've seen it in Wisconsin. We're fortunate; we're one of the states that still has same-day registration. And Scott Walker had a hard time getting rid of it because even his own kid registered the day of the election, so it was a little hard for him to be a hypocrite and change that law. But, we have had reduced early voting. We've had a photo ID law put in place. It's going to be harder for students to be able to get out to vote, and it's always the populations that are the most Democratic they go after. So we need to have a real debate about that because that's central in our democracy.
Right, and they're trying to put their thumb on the scales, and it's just wrong. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. We'll be back with more of your calls for him right after this. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan with us on the line, representing Wisconsin's 2nd District. His website, pocan.house.gov. And, of course, he's on Facebook as well. Julie in Green Bay, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Mr. Pocan. I would just like to start off with saying I wish you were the governor of Wisconsin instead of the person we have.
I can think of about 5.5 million people I'd rather have be governor than the current governor we have. But thank you, Julie.
Okay, so we know how Walker is famous for passing laws behind closed doors. And I just recently, and they don't put it enough in the news, but I recently saw that he, again at night behind closed doors, passed a law privatizing our water of Wisconsin. Did he not learn anything from Flint, Michigan? Is that going to happen to us? Can you kind of enlighten us on what's going on with that?
Well, this is interesting, Julie, because I've just heard a little bit from my friends in the legislature in Wisconsin. But what happened is they used it, and this is what Republicans are so very good at, saying one thing and doing another. They used it as a response to how to address what happened in Flint. And by doing it, they opened up an industry for people in Wisconsin. And, to their credit, some legislators like Amanda Stuck from Appleton and others I know have been pretty outspoken on this within the legislature back in Wisconsin. But, Scott Walker will do anything for the special interest, and that's been his agenda. He wanted to run for president. He did all these terrible things, as you know, to Wisconsin. He's not funding roads. We have the 3rd worst roads in the country, according to the National DOT. He cut K-12 schools. He cut the university system $250 million. You go on and on to the list of what we've had to suffer through. The good news, though, and Tom, this really is the good news. Mm-hmm. He was at 37% when his campaign for president fell apart in Wisconsin. He's, for the last 6 months, gone around the state trying to reacquaint himself to let everybody know he loves us. And a poll last week came out, and now he's at 38% approval. So he moved 1% of the people in the last 6 months. People are tired of what Scott Walker did to us. I think we're going to retake our governorship in 2018, and we're just going to have a lot of work to peel back all of these bad things that happened while he was governor.
Yeah, it's really a mind-boggling amount of damage, but it's also a really clear-eyed insight into what America would be like if a Koch brothers candidate like Scott Walker became president of the United States, which is a damn scary thing.
Absolutely.
A damn scary thing.
Absolutely.
Anyhow, Jeff in San Francisco, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
I just want to talk to the congressman about there's AB 525, the legalization in industrial hemp. And I know in your state you employ 52,000 workers in the paper making, and industrial hemp can be used to make paper, and I think it'd be great for the industry and the country. And I guess you had one on board. It was AB, let's see, I have it right here, and your state to come up for legalization, and it didn't come through. It's AB 638. And what's the possibilities of this?
The AB numbers, Jeff, those are Wisconsin state legislative bills, not federal bills. However, let me just start with this, Jeff. I support industrial hemp. I think it's something that we need to get, to pass. It's part of the drug wars that have stopped it. Yet, for so many years, hemp was used in a lot of different industries, and it's a foolish law that we did to ban that. In Wisconsin, though, specifically, I think, I was the author of the medical marijuana bill for years. And, I think one of the problems, even though we've seen so many states, especially on the coast, doing this, with the current makeup of the Wisconsin legislature and the current governor, you're not going to see them do anything that would make the pharmaceutical industry uncomfortable. And the pharmaceutical industry is one of the lead industries that doesn't want us to see us go down a path of whether it be medical marijuana or other legalization. And it's just a tough place given the current political makeup. Not that the people don't support it, because all the polls showed in Wisconsin people do support that. It's just difficult given the current political legislative makeup we have in our state.
Yeah, remarkable stuff. David, we're talking with U.S. Congressman Mark Pocan. He represents the 2nd District of the state of Wisconsin here in Washington, D.C. in the U.S. House of Representatives, pocan.house.gov. David in Woodland Hills, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. I have a lot of conservatives in my life, and every time I tell them that Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist, they all say, oh, he's a communist. That's the same thing. Can you define for us, both of you, the difference between a communist, a socialist, and a social democrat, and then maybe list some of the major countries in the world that are operating as social democracies?
Okay, that's a huge question, David. Thank you for that. But, Congressman, we have just 2 minutes until the end of the hour.
Let me say this. One, I thought Saturday Night Live actually did one of the best jobs of explaining with Larry David and Bernie Sanders the difference, because to call definitely not a communist, that's just someone who is a Tea Party person or chooses not to think. The difference between a Democratic socialist and a socialist is quite a big gap. I saw somewhere, and I hate to make it a bumper sticker, but it's almost true. A Democratic socialist really is we the people, right? It's allowing people the greatest possible ability to have a say in their government, and to say that it's anything that's unusual compared to what we see in so many countries in Europe, and quite honestly, where I think the vast majority of American people are, is trying to find a boogeyman. Because don't forget, the Republicans love fear. They govern best when you're afraid, and they're going to make you afraid of a term. They're going to make you afraid of an enemy. They're going to make you afraid of something. And I think that if we get beyond the terminology, although granted they will try to use it over and over, there isn't anything that we should be afraid of, and we should just realize that people are going to describe themselves in different ways. But Democratic Socialist, Tom, I don't know about you, but we the people seems to be a pretty fair, short definition for me.
Yeah, I think George Washington was a Democratic Socialist. He signed legislation to provide for the poor here in Washington, D.C., for example. We've got libraries, we've got roads, we've got fire departments, we've got all kinds of stuff. I mean, I think our country is a democratic socialist country. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the vast majority of issues that would fall in that category is where the vast majority of people are. And but again, I think if we have a debate about democratic socialism versus communism, we are going to fail miserably. We need to talk about the values, what it means to make sure that every family has opportunity, right. That we're making sure that people having wage growth, who've been working hard and want to make more, and we want to make sure that we're investing in things like our infrastructure, making sure a flint never happens in a country as great as ours.
Yeah, well said. Totally agree. Congressman Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, pocan.house.gov. Thank you, Congressman.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Glad to do this. This is great.
Thanks. Great talking with you. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.